Seniors have chosen one of the several substitute teachers who graciously help us out throughout the year, Jim Jacobs. Jim Jacobs holds the Bachelor of Science degree from Northern State University in South Dakota and a Master of Arts in German from the University of Washington. He has taught German and social studies for 35 years in Minnesota. He has been a beloved and talented substitute teacher at Raleigh Charter High School for the last 8 years. When our seniors chose the person they wished to hear speaking at our school's 10th graduation exercises, they selected Mr. Jacobs. Please join me in welcoming Jim Jacobs.
Dr. Humble, faculty members, family, friends, seniors. You're looking good. I like the funny hats. You did this, you see, and I don't know, when Linda Hash gave me a heads up on this thing and said, Ms. Atkinson is going to call you down and tell you that you're supposed to do the graduation speech. When I went down there, I found it quite difficult to say no to her, but I did say, do you think that this is a good idea? She said the students have chosen speaker. So I would say to you, your secrets are safe with me. Mostly. Most of them. There's also this to remember about graduation speakers. We're famous for not remembering who they were. If you ask 10 people who spoke at your high school graduation, there can be 10 blank faces. So I take comfort in that 10 years from now, you will not be able to remember who spoke at your graduation. And I also take some comfort in the fact that 10 years from now, I might also not remember who spoke at your graduation. I did make an effort to remember ours, though, out in South Dakota. It was 50 years ago. I graduated in 61, so it was exactly 50 years ago. His name was Truman Wold, and no one knew anything about him. And what he said, I have absolutely no idea. But I made it a point, and I've had to remind myself practically every single year for the last 50 years, Truman Wold spoke at our graduation. I also believe Dr. Humble said you graduate alphabetically. So I take it, Max, you're going to be the first one, and Stephen back there someplace, you're going to be the last one. We graduated by height. The administrators did not like the idea of people marching in one, like this and one like that. And therefore they took us all down to the gymnasium and they made us line up along the wall, and we ended up like this. We sort of graduated in an inclined plane. At least we lined up that way. When I was still teaching school, our school district built a new building. That was in 1993 that it first opened. It was the first time this town had passed a school bond issue in something like 30 years. The superintendent that they'd had for 20 years could never get one passed. 3 times he failed, and so we never got a new building under him. A new superintendent came along, worked very hard and well with the community, and we got a new building. It was awesome. It had air conditioning in it. It had Anderson windows in it. It had carpeted hallways. It had gymnasiums, all these things you don't have here. It had gymnasiums, it had lunchrooms, athletic fields. I mean, it just had all this stuff. And of course, there was a wonderful dedication ceremony on a Sunday afternoon in the school gymnasium. The whole community came. I think it's because they hadn't seen a new building in so many years, but they just wanted to see this because it was, for that community, so absolutely historic. And the important people sat up here. The superintendent was there, school board members, and they all spoke. A teacher spoke. Somebody wrote a song for the choir to sing, and it was a wonderful thing, especially to see people who didn't have children there in the school anymore to come out to see their school. One student was on the dais that day. And when he started to speak, he did not talk about the Anderson windows or the carpeting or the air conditioning or what this new building meant. He talked about education. And he said several things, and I remember 3 of them. Education is the solution to poverty. Education is a solution to disease. Education is a solution to war. You could add a lot of things to that list that education can do. And I believe in my heart that any of you from this graduating class right here could have made that same speech. You certainly can't talk about the windows and the air conditioning in your building or anything like that. But you understand what education is about. It's what you got at this place. And I've seen this going on as a substitute. I've been able to look at the tests you had to take and think, my God, I'm glad I didn't go to this school. I would have never graduated. I would have never made it. No, you could have done that. I've seen you, for example, in lunch periods where you have to parents who might, or to people who might not know how they eat lunch at a school with no cafeteria, is they have DLA, designated lunch areas. And that'd be a classroom, and whoever wants to go sit in that classroom, or they can sit out of doors in the patio if the weather is fine. But they will end up in the classroom, and since as a substitute teacher, I would always stay in there to see what was going on. I saw kids explaining math problems to other kids. I saw one kid stood at the whiteboard in one of the math rooms and went through a problem to a student who was not understanding it, and then he would say, you can also look at it this way, and then he would explain it again. I mean, that's education. I was able to see in our friend Maida's class period during his lunch that he was the chair of the contemporary issues group. Some of you are in that, you've been to that. And I would see people from your class and the other classes sitting around every Wednesday discussing current issues that face our country. And it was a shame to the people who are on television who scream and holler at each other. Because I saw maturity, I saw politeness, I saw intelligence, I saw insight. I saw people that made me feel good about the rest of the world and about what's coming down the line. It was impressive. I've seen you at the food shelf, weighing out sweet potatoes, putting them into bags, and sorting out canned goods and things that have been distributed. I've seen you in elementary schools trying to explain fractions to fourth graders. I don't know how many of you brought, maybe it was not particularly you in particular, but I don't know how many people brought along pizza pies. You know, and if we divide the pies this way, we got 8 pizzas, now we got 7, that type of thing. It's a favorite way of figuring out what's supposed to be going on. I've seen your recycling programs. You're impressive. Now, everything is not perfect. And there are some things that I would like to say about this class right here that I've experienced. I want to tell you a story about the test of English as a foreign language, TOEFL. Test of English as a foreign language. Perhaps some people who are here today have dealt with this test somewhere along the line. Our church sponsored a family from Iraq, and they came over here as political refugees several years ago, and were helped by the church in all sorts of ways, and as time went along, they got more and more independent until now we have just very, very limited contact with them. I went and visited them every now and then, about every 4 months. I go visit our friends from Iraq, and we always, how are you doing here, who's this, that kind of chit-chat stuff. One time they said to me, this test of English as a foreign language is also pronounced TOEFL. So they said to me, what do you think of TOEFL? I thought they said tofu. I said, a lot of people like it. Especially vegetarians. You can get it at the grocery store. It comes in little plastic containers. As I sat there explaining TOEFL, I got these very funny smiles, polite smiles on the faces of these wonderful people of, I wonder who it really is in this room who should be taking the test of English as a foreign language. And I think they thought it was not they. I have seen those same faces, those same smiles of when he's totally lost and doesn't know what's going on in faces from graduating seniors. I remember the time in Dr. Marshall's classroom. Dr. Marshall teaches English and German, and I think it was German, English, German in the class periods. First period was German, English, English, something like that. And in the English class, they were talking about one of my favorite topics, which is corporal punishment and how people used to beat their children and sometimes still do, and how when we first started teaching, we always hit the kids. And I even had a professor who showed us how to grab a kid by the arm and walk him down the hallway without leaving marks. That was 50 years ago we're talking about now, too. But I saw these same smiles the day that I was in a German class and thought I was in the English class. And so I launched into this thing on corporal punishment that we had been studying, we'd been reading this thing about an assistant principal, a vice principal in Iran who carried a whip. And when the students didn't behave properly, he would literally whip them and they would bleed and things. And that was, that was a very powerful little piece of literature. Well, these German kids sat there with these same smiles on their faces that I watched my Iraqi friends do, and they were thinking, I'm sure, just let him go. Just don't stop him now, just don't know. But I can still see those looks until finally I realized I'm in the wrong class here, and so we then had German class.